The day had begun with the kind of crisp morning air that made Detective Maya Johnson believe, if only for a fleeting second, that life might finally slow down for her, that the endless grind of homicide cases, late-night interrogations, and the gnawing loneliness of a life dedicated to justice might grant her a reprieve, and so she arrived at the bustling international airport with her travel bag slung over her shoulder, her hair neatly braided, her dark eyes scanning the terminal not like a weary traveler but like a woman whose instincts had been sharpened by 15 years in the force, a woman who could read tension in body language the way others read text on a page, and though today was supposed to be different, a simple flight to Los Angeles to visit her mother, who had begged her for months to come home for a proper family dinner. Maya felt the familiar pull of alertness even as she checked her ticket, printed days ago, a ticket that bore the golden lettering of first class, not because she wanted luxury, but because she needed peace, space, and the chance to rest her tired mind during the cross-country flight, and as she walked past the chattering families, the frazzled business travelers juggling laptops and coffee cups, and the honeymooners holding hands, she felt the weight of her badge inside her leather purse, a silent reminder of who she was even when the world insisted on questioning it, but she had no reason to expect that today, her authority, her dignity, her very right to sit in the seat she had paid for would be challenged in front of strangers. The gate agent had smiled politely as she scanned Maya's ticket, the security officers had barely glanced at her ID as she moved through the checkpoint, and for a fleeting moment she thought the universe had decided to let her rest, but the truth is, the universe is never so kind, especially to a black woman who carried herself with quiet strength in places where people did not believe she belonged, so when she boarded the plane, the wide-bodied jet with its sleek leather seats and the faint smell of new upholstery mingled with jet fuel, she felt that rare calm settle in, sliding into seat 2A, a window seat at the front where the view would remind her of freedom above the clouds, and she placed her carry-on carefully in the overhead compartment, tucking her purse with her badge safely inside, before sitting down, straight-backed yet comfortable, pulling a well-worn book from her bag, a habit to anchor herself during flights. And she had only just begun to read when she noticed the man across the aisle staring at her with the kind of contempt that carried centuries of unspoken assumptions, his pale blue eyes narrowing, his lips pressed tight into a sneer that barely concealed his disdain, and though Maya had encountered looks like this every day of her life, in the courtroom, on the streets, in stores where clerks followed her too closely, something about his unfiltered audacity told her he was not content to keep his prejudice behind his teeth, and true enough, within minutes, as the last of the first-class passengers boarded and the crew prepared to close the doors, the man leaned forward, motioning urgently to a passing flight attendant, a young woman barely out of training by the look of her nervous posture, and in a voice that carried far louder than necessary, he said, "Excuse me, there must be a mistake. This section is for first-class passengers only, not for people like her," and the deliberate emphasis on her slashed through the air like a blade, snapping the attention of nearby passengers, some gasping, some whispering, and some, the worst kind, averting their eyes as though silence absolved them of complicity, but Maya remained still, her book resting open on her lap, her spine straight, her dark gaze fixed on the man with the kind of quiet fire that made criminals confess in interrogation rooms, and though the attendant stammered, fumbling with her manifest, clearly uncertain how to handle such an open display of arrogance, the man grew bolder, standing up now, adjusting his expensive suit jacket, pointing a finger directly at Maya as though she were a trespasser in his kingdom, and declaring, "She doesn't belong here, this seat must be stolen, and if you don't remove her, I'll have security do it for you," his booming voice reverberating through the cabin, drawing more attention, more cell phones raised discreetly to record the spectacle, while Maya, ever the professional, breathed deeply, calling on the discipline drilled into her from years of service, years of being doubted even by her own colleagues until her record of solved cases silenced them all, and though her blood burned hot beneath her skin, she refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her rattled, instead lifting her chin, watching the flight attendants exchange frantic glances, torn between placating the entitled customer and respecting the manifest in their hands, and when two male attendants approached, summoned by the commotion, the man smirked triumphantly, as though the sight of reinforcements confirmed his victory, and he barked, "Good, now take her out of here before she embarrasses this airline further," but it was then, at the precise moment when the weight of centuries seemed to press down upon her shoulders. That Maya made her move, slow, deliberate, devastating. In its authority, reaching up to the overhead compartment with unhurried grace, pulling down her purse, unzipping it with fingers that had steadied weapons and signed warrants, and withdrawing her badge, gleaming under the cabin lights, the engraved seal catching every eye in its orbit, and she held it up high, her voice calm yet resonant, the voice of command honed from years of commanding crime scenes. "Detective Maya Johnson, Major Crimes Division," she announced, the words slicing clean through the tension, freezing every whisper, "and unless you want this entire flight delayed while I file a formal harassment report and have you escorted off this plane in handcuffs for false accusation and attempted removal of a lawfully seated passenger, I suggest you sit down and mind your business." And the silence that followed was thunderous, the man's mouth falling open, his smug grin collapsing into something pale and weak. The attendants frozen, eyes wide, passengers shifting uncomfortably. Their earlier cowardice mirrored back at them in the reflection of her badge, and though she lowered it after only a few seconds, tucking it back into her purse with the same composure she had displayed throughout, her eyes never wavered from his, pinning him down like a suspect under interrogation, and in a tone low enough for only him to hear, she added, "Your seat doesn't come with the right to decide who belongs here." The words landing with the finality of a gavel, and though the captain's voice soon came over the intercom urging passengers to prepare for takeoff, no one dared to challenge her again, no one whispered another doubt about her presence, and the man who had tried to strip her dignity spent the rest of the flight glued to his seat, his shoulders tense, his eyes darting anywhere but toward the woman who had dismantled his arrogance with nothing more than the truth and the authority he never saw coming. And though Maya opened her book once more, the words blurred behind her eyes, for beneath her calm exterior she knew this was more than just an isolated confrontation, it was a reflection of the world she had always lived in, a world that demanded she carry proof of her worth wherever she went, yet she also knew something else, that every time she stood her ground, every time she refused to bow, she became not just a defender of justice in her professional life, but a symbol of defiance in the face of ignorance. And as the engines roared and the plane lifted into the night sky, she allowed herself, at last, a small, private smile, not of victory but of resilience, the kind of smile her mother would recognize when she stepped off the plane hours later, the smile of a daughter who refused to be diminished, who carried both the weight and the pride of her identity like the badge she wore, unshakable, undeniable, unforgettable.